Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our webinar on how schools are incorporating PE and recess in their reopening plans this fall, and how you and school health advisory councils can help as we move forward. So I'm really excited to have my panelists today, but before we get to that, logistics. You probably already guessed you can use your phone or your computer speakers. We have everyone muted, so because we are going to be recording, and you can submit your questions. Should be a Q&A box. There is also a chat box, so if you just want to say hi or you have a comment you want to make, you can toss it into the chat box. If you have a question you want to make sure that we get answered, put it in the Q&A box. As I mentioned, it is being recorded, and we will send a link as well as a PDF of the slides from our speakers following the webinar and any other resources that they might have that would be useful. So today we have with us, our first speaker will be Pete Silvius. He is the Director of Whole Child Initiatives at Seguin ISD. And then we have Kelly Meadows, who is RN, BSN with Little Cypress Morrisville ISD, and is the Director of Health Services there. And John Adams, who is El Paso ISD Director of Health, Wellness, and Physical Education. So we're really thrilled to have these three different perspectives on reopening and integrating physical education and recess, and how school health advisory councils can be working to help. So first up, we have Pete, and I'm going to turn it over to you.
Well, thanks, Michelle. Good morning, everybody. I want to start by thanking Michelle for all her work that she does all year long to help keep us supported through all of these endeavors that we have. And goodness, it's been kind of a challenging one the past few months, and Michelle's been right there with us. And also want to thank John and Kelly. It's always good to spend time with you guys. So this will be a fun morning. I do work in Seguin ISD. It's an honor for me to work for Seguin ISD. I feel like Seguin ISD is really on the cusp of some wonderful things under the leadership of Dr. Gutierrez. And we've been able to make some strides that I think are pretty impressive for a small school district. So it's my honor to represent Seguin ISD here today. I posted a picture of one of our outdoor camps that we run through Seguin ISD. My passion is outdoor education, and I sure have missed the kids this summer. So we haven't been able to do any of that. So this picture makes me feel like I'm connected to what I usually get to do in the summertime with these kids. So Michelle, you can go ahead and jump right to the first slide. So I want to talk a little bit about the process that we've gone through in Seguin ISD to get to where we are today. Seguin ISD shut down schools just like all of you guys did, I'm sure, in March, and we immediately started to realize how much there is to learn, and how we have to quickly respond to the needs of our community, and I think we did a pretty good job of that. But by no means do I want to say that I have any knowledge that really grants me the authority to be here talking to you guys today. I'm sure that all of you guys that are listening today could provide perspectives that are as significant and in most cases more significant than what I can provide. But I'm going to just share what we are doing in Seguin ISD. So as we started to approach the school year, we wanted to be more intentional about what we were going to provide and where we are going to allocate resources, because the spring really was that triage approach. You know, what can we do quickly to provide the support that we need? So the slide that you see right here is a slide that came out of some task force work that was put together for several weeks, starting in May, to kind of come up with some thoughts on what the opening of school should look like. And so I framed my work around the 5 tenets of whole child education. And that gave us a foundation to kind of set up the plan that we released last night. And that plan, I'll show you some slides off of that plan specifically related to recess and with PE, but all of that came through this foundational work that is right here. I want to point out just a couple of things. So the top one is that is healthy. We have Link as anchor program in Seguin ISD, and some of you will be familiar with that name because you heard from Dr. Debbie Ray last week on the presentation that Michelle assembled about the Link project. So we've been a Link district for a number of years now. It's embedded pretty deeply into what we do here. And so it was going to be really important as we restart school and as pressures are mounting for minutes and for really thinking about lost instructional time, that we don't forget that the reason why we are a Link district is maybe even more important now than it was back in pre-COVID times. So we need kids to have access to the outdoors. We need kids to be exposed to sunlight and to nature to keep immune systems high. And we need that foundation to help us to maintain the social emotional environment that we all know is conducive to learning. So that was really important. It was also really important that we engage with our nursing staff. We have some of the best RNs in the world that work for Seguin ISD, and it's an ongoing pleasure to engage with them. And when we think about this pandemic and really back away from all of the constant barrage of information that's coming to us, it's important to remember that pre-pandemic, the nurses were the public health director at that campus. They think of all the things that they field. I mean, it's funny to talk to nurses about this. I mean, they diagnose teachers' illnesses nonstop. Kids come in on Monday morning and say, "Mom told me to show you this." So we really wanted to empower our school nurses to be able to provide some of the support that they were doing pre-pandemic and then make it relevant to the new issues that we have. And I think that's all I'll touch on this slide. But I think it's important to just set the foundation that we were trying to think about the whole child as we created this plan. So as I mentioned, this was shared last night for the first time, and it is on the Seguin ISD website, and I can provide a link later in this presentation if anyone wants to look at it. I know all of you are creating reopening plans, and all of our plans are based on the same types of things of CDC guidance, TEA guidance, and requirements. But then everyone puts their own little unique spin on it, and so there might be some value in you viewing ours. Michelle, you can jump to the next slide, please. So let's start with what I did was I just cut and pasted out of that plan now to show you what we're going to do with recess. So real important thing to point out here is that recess is going to continue. I have had staff around Seguin ISD email and call me and say, why in the world would we be worried about recess right now? And so that just points out, even in a district that has had years of training to remind students and staff just how important recess is to the academic expectations we have, to the social emotional expectations we have, it's still, when you get to this point, you still have those questions being raised. So we wanted to ensure everyone that recess is going to happen. And in Seguin, that means that our youngest students have 4 recess breaks a day. So that means 4 transitions to the outdoor space. We're going to utilize masks in those transition times. Once they get outside, it's going to be very similar to what UIL policy is. Masks are not required during active play. And the reason for that is that we will not, when kids are moving around and active, we will not have the risks that are associated with how we qualify contact. So that would be within 6 feet, close contact with someone that was infected for more than 15 minutes. And so that won't happen. And so that will allow us to not have the mask requirement during that active play. But they'll sanitize hands on the way to recess, they'll sanitize hands on the way back. And of course, we will utilize every open space that is around a school. Some of those might be traditional playgrounds, some of those might be open space or courtyards that become spaces where kids can play to increase that distancing opportunity. We're going to shut down access to water fountains and require that every student bring a water bottle. Okay, Michelle, you can jump to the next slide. And what I want to touch on here is that physical education policies are going to be very similar to how we're handling the recess policies. So we will be using masks in transition during active play. Those will not be required. We will try to utilize as many outdoor spaces for PE as possible, and we will sanitize on the way in and out. And you can jump to the next slide, Michelle. And this is just going to continue with some of the elementary stuff. The maybe notable to point out is that we're going to try to use cohort type groups within the gym, small sided type games to limit exposure. And you can jump to the next slide, Michelle, where I'm going to get into secondary. Really, all of the same type things apply here, except for that this year we are not going to require dressing out. So students will not, well, one, they'll not have that opportunity, but they'll also not have that requirement. And so those of us that have been around the PE world, there's a lot of sides to discuss on that, you know, and there's lots of pros and cons on both sides. So on some levels, it's we worry about what the health risks are of not changing before exercise, and then on the other side, we worry about what those risks might be, increasing use of those locker rooms. Often those are shared spaces with multiple classes and with multiple teams, and we just felt like that was not a manageable situation for us. I also want to point out that we are going to recommend, and we're in the process of purchasing them for the district, but we're going to recommend that families look for buff scarf type masks that can easily go up and down. We're utilizing that with athletics now, and all we have to think about is, you know, how many coats are sitting on every playground right now across the state because of the way we closed down the school, and just multiply that times 10 when we think about masks. I mean, that can really be a challenge. So those buff type would allow kids to not have to try to find a pocket or a place to put their mask when they're transitioning from that physical activity time to going back into the classroom or what have you. And Michelle, I think that might be the end of my portion. Before I stop talking, though, I want to say that in Seguin ISD, we are making plans to reopen on September 8th with a full online option or a full face-to-face option. And so what we are doing right now is we are taking those weeks that we have with the delayed opening, and we are writing lesson plans for online instruction. So we are going to have a unified online PE curriculum by grade level across the district, and that's being written by our PE staff right now. And what we're aiming to do is to provide 2 online PE lessons per week, and that fits in with that 180-minute TEA kind of requirement that has been put in place. So that is a work in progress, and we can talk more about that. There's a tremendous amount of resources out there for online instruction, and so we're utilizing all of them. So I'll stop talking there and look forward to hearing from John and Kelly.
You're really accurate. It's 11:45 exactly. Wow. Quick question. What about indoors? What if they're back in school and you can't go outdoors, or y'all using gyms or classrooms? Or
we are going to use gyms as needed, and we will also provide an indoor recess time if the weather would not support outdoor recess. And so what we're going to do there is that in the situations where we're not engaged in active play, then kids would be masked up, of course. We're going to try to limit shared supplies, which often when we're doing indoor recess, you know, we pull out a bunch of different things that are shared around. So that's going to be a challenge going forward. We're not quite sure yet how exactly that will look. Typically, we don't allow kids to bring things to school to play with, but this year we might have to do that just to limit that shared use. And in the gyms, the way that our class numbers are established, we can social distance pretty easy with our PE numbers. And so some of the things that might work well here in Seguin are a result of us having procedures and processes in place that value and support PE and recess already. So, yeah.
We have a couple of questions, but I think I'm going to hold them, and I think we'll get to those at the end because I think all of our presenters can probably answer those. I would like to introduce Alice Kirk, who is the State Action for Healthy Kids State Chair, and I am Michelle Smith, the Action for Healthy Kids State Coordinator. I forgot to introduce myself earlier when I welcomed everyone. So I get so excited about having these great people on this. I just want to get right to the presentations. So we'll get to those questions at the end. We have allowed time for Q&A. And now I'm going to turn it over to Kelly.
Good morning. I am excited to be with you this morning. I'm coming to you from my office. I am the Director of Health Services for the Little Cypress Mauriceville School District here in Orange, Texas, so Southeast Texas. I'm also the school nurse at Little Cypress Intermediate, so a 4th and 5th grade campus. When I was earlier this summer, I was asked to be our contact person as far as COVID for our district. So I was brought in, and I've been meeting with our administrators and had the opportunity to work with our plan from the very beginning, which was exciting. It's also very scary because it changes constantly as, you know, TEA, and we learn new information. So what I wanted to share with you is about how our School Health Advisory Council got involved and the impact they've made. So Michelle, you can go ahead. Once we had a draft of our plan, it had been revised numerous times, but we were getting ready to move forward with our plan. We decided that we would share it with our School Health Advisory Council. We did a Zoom meeting and actually go through the plan line item by line item and get their feedback and their impact, their input on the plan. And we learned some very valuable lessons. One of the things that our district had done was to decide that we would limit the number of visitors and people that are coming into our buildings to protect them as much as possible. So right off the bat, our activity that's, you know, very popular, which is Meet the Teacher, was chosen to be one of the things that we really limited. We're just doing that with our pre-K and kindergarten classes. And so at that point, our School Health Advisory Council asked us to organize virtual Meet the Teachers events. And so that's the way our district is going to be handling that. So our teachers are in the process of preparing that, a way to reach out to the families and to let them know who the teacher is, whether they're going to be virtual or face-to-face. As I said, we began talking through our plan, and some of the things that we had found out from TEA and that impacted our district was, as a school nurse, I know that I'm going to have kids come into the clinic that are going to run fever. And, you know, we always try to protect the other kids and isolate as quickly as possible, but sometimes we have to hold on to the kids for a while. So the way my clinic is built and the way several of the clinics in our district are built, we don't have the the possibility of setting up an isolation area within the clinic. So we've actually commandeered empty classrooms or meeting spaces, and that has become tagged as the isolation room. For me, it's a science lab next door to my office. So if a child is feeling ill, I'm not going to want them to have to worry about sitting on a lab stool or in a folding chair while they're waiting for their families. So I was sharing this with our School Health Advisory Council. One of our members is a member of, and he's actually a minister of one of the local churches that frequently hosts shelters after a storm. And so I asked him if they still had any of the cots that they had received from FEMA that they used during the shelters. They didn't have them, but he began reaching out because they had given them back. And so he made some phone calls, and he ended up connecting me with, reminding me to reach out to the Red Cross. And when I reached out to them, within 30 minutes, they asked me, because I'd said I wanted 6 for our district. They asked me where did they need to deliver them. And so that was a real exciting thing. It was something that I wasn't going to have to purchase, but the community made available to us. The other thing that we realized in our community especially is that many times when we send kids home with fever, the families, or we get kids at school that come with fever, the family doesn't have a thermometer. And in this day and time, it's really important for them to be able to monitor the temperature, especially if that's one of the criteria you're using to allow the kids to come back to school. So we know that we can't purchase thermometers with state or federal funding to give to the families. And so when we mentioned this to our School Health Advisory Council, our churches began to step up, and we also have our emergency management. They've actually, one of our churches actually has bought 100 digital thermometers for the nurses to give out to the families as needed. We have other organizations in our community that have offered to do the same thing. So we're helping to meet the needs of both the school and the community by providing those thermometers. You can go to the next slide. I know a lot of, when I've talked with other districts, some of their school health advisory councils are very active, and some they only utilize it to meet the requirements. I know that when I talk with them about them, the ones that are kind of hesitant to involve their school health advisory councils, it's because they're afraid of the backlash or the input, that the negative things they may hear from the council. What we decided to do was to actually engage our families that had, took issues with things that were going, especially the way things were handled, especially as related to health or the sex education or PE or recess, and actually included them in our, asked them to be members of our School Health Advisory Council. So one of the things that they did was, when the topic that was real hot for them came up, we provided them with all of the information that we as a district had. This was beautiful to watch when we talked about our sex education classes. And initially in the meeting, they said, we're not going to be involved in that. My child will not attend that class. Once they actually had the opportunity to look at what the district was offering, they became our biggest spokesperson for that event, and they began talking to other parents. And so we truly had the buy-in. We utilized them. They became our spokesperson, and we didn't have the issues on social media because they took care of it, just in their contacts and getting their circle of friends. So that was great. They also help us, they identified a need that we weren't seeing, and this was prior to the requirement in regards to the seizure education that's now required for staff members. And they wanted that And so utilizing them, we were able to increase our education base and the people that were prepared to deal with those students that had seizures. Well, we're using those same type approaches in regards to the COVID-19, and they're helping us identify resources. I got a phone call last night and they offered, more thermometers if we need them, or, ask us what other needs we had. Do we need funding to purchase things, or do they need to bring items to us? And that's simply because we have them engaged. When our school shut down suddenly in March, we have International Paper has a facility here in town, and they were deemed one of the essential businesses. We had already purchased masks, and we had gloves, and we had pulse oximeters on hand, as well as the infrared digital thermometers. Well, since we weren't going to be in school, we made available our supplies to International Paper. So they were able to be up and running. They were the first plant to be online and screen their employees and everything. That has forged a real strong bond between the two entities. In May, when we were bringing our staff back, they came back and they not only replaced all of what they had received from us, they gave us back, in addition, everything that they didn't use, as well as an additional $1,000 check, which was the total cost of the amount of supplies that I'd given them. They have, because they had been in screening their employees and been active during all of this, they had 4 months of data, procedures, and plans that they have given us access to, which has been a tremendous help to us. And so we supported them in our community. They turned around and got engaged and are a tremendous supporter of our school districts. So that works. I encourage others to reach out to their school health advisory councils. We have businesses represented. We have local religious organizations. We have nonprofit organizations. We have parents. We have had students on there. One of our students utilized our school health advisory council to help them receive awards through the Scouts. And it was just a really neat bonding opportunity. And because we have those bonds, we have a greater network in order to utilize to approach with COVID-19. Last slide. So sometimes, especially in this ever-changing environment, you just need a different perspective. And my granddaughter reminds me of that frequently. I just have to step back and look at it from other people's point of view and see, I don't have all the answers. I have very few of them, and the answers that I do have may not be correct tomorrow because things are changing. But I just have to stop and think, other people are seeing this from a different perspective. I need to include their view as we move forward and just try to do the next right thing.
That was excellent, Kelly. It's exciting to hear how well your SHAC has worked and helped you with networking with the community and really coming to the forefront. So I appreciate that, and I love this picture.
Thank you.
It's definitely cute. Okay, John, let's hear how El Paso's doing.
So good morning, everybody. I guess for most of you, it's good afternoon. I'm on Mountain Time here, so I'm a different time zone. But first, I want to start by thanking Michelle for putting these together, because one thing that I found with these meetings is that it's nice to hear that we're doing things the same as other districts, and it kind of reinforces what we're doing. But yet, at the same time, we get the opportunity to hear some things that are being done differently. And I think it's important for us to be able to do that. I don't think there's any one right answer for any of this. And so the more information that we can get and share, I think is great for us. So go ahead and take this next slide. So one thing, I want to talk a little bit about the advocacy that's been talked about on some of these webinars before. So our C&I team developed some committees for each level, elementary, middle school, and high school, to plan our back to school training for our teachers. And we've done that in the past, but for the most part, that was more content driven, like the content people would take care of their own, what we call job alikes and things like that. But this year, our district leadership decided this needs to be a coordinated effort. We need to make sure that all teachers, classroom teachers, social studies teachers, math teachers, PE teachers, fine arts teachers need to be on the same page for some of this virtual learning piece. And so we were able to do that this year. And that was very important. And I'm going to use something that was said both in the Tayford Summer Conference and last week by Otis. And that is, if not at the table, you're on the menu. And I think in the spring, we were a little bit on the menu. We didn't really know what was going on. And you know, we found out some things after the fact. Yes, we knew we were going to close. We found out after the fact that this is going to be the plan. And we were kind of left out of it to a certain degree. And we did not allow that to happen this time, planning for the new school year. We were involved in that planning process. What is PE going to look like come fall of 2020? How are we going to be able to support our teachers? How are we going to drive some of that process? And so we were certainly not only at the table this time around, but we were helping to plan the menu rather than being on it. And so EPISD has PE recess and brain breaks in the forefront of their daily schedules. And I'm going to share some of that with you, but you know, I can't say enough. If we don't advocate for our programs, and Pete said it earlier, you know, yeah, everybody's worried about our kids being behind academically. Yep, I got that. Guess what? Physical activity can support closing that gap. And so we've really implemented that into what we're doing this year. Next slide. So this is kind of small. I apologize for that, but the purpose of me sharing this slide with you is, if you look at the colorful part of the slide there to the left, you'll see yellow and blue and red, and then yellow and blue and red, but you see the red writing in between those timelines. Yeah, right there. There are brain breaks built into our schedules in elementary school every single day. You know, they want kids to get away from both online virtual learning and face-to-face. You know, we know the importance of getting those kids up and moving. So in addition to our daily PE, and we're doing daily PE still, both virtually and when we return back face-to-face on September 8th. And I need to note that our kids are coming back August 17th, but we're starting virtually. We were going to start with a hybrid schedule where we have half of our kids on campuses and half at home, but our city governors, our city manager, our city leadership has put in a mandate that we are not allowed in our buildings at all until after September 8th. So even though we had a plan for that, the city's not allowing for that. And so we had to adjust. And so our kids are going to be learning virtually at least for the first 4 weeks. And so even during that virtual time, there are brain breaks built into their day. And then over here, the little box is kind of separate. It came from the bottom of that document. That's our PE schedule. So the expectation is every day our kids will be engaged in face-to-face instruction with independent time to work on their skill development every single day, whether it's virtual or face-to-face. And so it's very important. I'm very happy the fact that our district recognized that. So here's just another sample. That's fine. You can go to the next slide. So here's another sample of what our expectation is for our PE teachers. We want the communication to be very clear for our parents and for our teachers and for our students. And so we're asking our PE teachers to put together a peek at our week. And this is just a sample. Our PE teacher will be developing their own, but we want them to be able to communicate what the expectation is for their students as they go through each week. And so, you know, it's kind of like a year in review, you know, a year at a glance. This is a week at a glance. We want our kids to know this is the expectation for this week. Next slide. So also what we ask our PE teachers to do, and we're providing some support for this. Our hybrid schedule is going to be very difficult for teachers to plan, for our PE teachers to plan. How am I going to be teaching half my kids on my playground or on my blacktop or in my gym, and the other half are going to be at home. And then the second half of the week, we flip-flop that, and the kids who were at home are now here. And so we want to make sure they have some tools in place to help them do that. So what this document is, and I have to give my staff credit for this. I did not create this document. My staff, two of my staff members put this together. And so they have a face-to-face lesson, and then they have a virtual lesson. And then in the middle there is kind of the lesson. This is the lesson. These are the skills that we want our kids to learn. Over on the left, this is how they're going to be taught, and this is how they're going to learn in face-to-face. And then on the right, this is how that concept is going to be learned and taught from a virtual perspective. And so since we are going to probably have a hybrid schedule when we return in September, we are not going to have 100% of our kids on campus. We needed to give them some tools so they can navigate that. How am I going to teach kids in two different scenarios at the same time? And so we're providing some resources and some help to support that. So then again, resources for recess and brain breaks. Again, this is something that we're doing every single day. There's going to be brain breaks that are going to be taught throughout the day. And so we're providing links and some assistance with that. We also have that little brain breaks link there is actually on our EPISD home website that's on the internal site that our teachers have access to. And there's hundreds of brain break activities that we've been using for years. And now, like Pete said, it's kind of moving to the forefront a little bit, but we're providing that process. So when I said earlier about not being at the table, you're going to be on the menu. So some things that we realize as we're advocating for our programs is things are going to be different. You know, teachers having expectations for the way they've taught are going to have to change a little bit. And so I understood that as well. I couldn't go in there expecting to get 100% return on what it was that I was advocating for. So we won the daily PE battle, if you will. And so I was happy with that. What I was not able to convince them of is having outdoor recess. And so, but they did commit to having at least a virtual recess every single day. And so, okay, I will take that. I want it to be outdoors. Right now with our numbers in El Paso and the way our city government is kind of guiding that process, I'm okay with that. I mean, our kids are going to be outside when they can be for PE, you know, and like Pete said, they will be wearing masks except for the actual MVPA time, but in the transitions, they'll be wearing masks. And so if in order to make that happen, I had to give up a little bit of what I wanted for recess, I'm okay with that because they didn't eliminate it completely. There was a 50-50 there. What can it look like? Okay, I'll take that. I'm continuing to advocate for having outdoor recess every day. Right now we are not there, but at some point we will be, and I'm okay with that. At least we were involved in the discussion. We weren't on the menu. We weren't on the menu. We were at the table discussing that. And I think that's very important for us to understand. If I hadn't been at the table, I don't know what would have happened. I mean, it could have been very different. But since we were at the table, we weren't on the menu. And so I can't emphasize enough how important it is as PE and health professionals. We have to have the advocacy piece. We have to be able to say, yeah, we understand kids are 4 months behind, but the research shows that kids who are physically active, the chances of them closing that gap is better. And so if we're at the table sharing that data that we know and the information that we know, it's not going to be presented. So we have to advocate for that. Next slide, Michelle. So I want to share this with you. I heard earlier this week or last week that the state may be going to purchasing Schoology as the platform for all school districts. So we're already using Schoology. So I think we're going to be one of the districts in the state where districts are going to call us and say, hey, how do we use Schoology? So what we created so we have our own health, wellness, and PE Schoology site, but we also wanted to create a sample Schoology site for our teachers to build off of. Again, we were at the table. We don't want PE teachers doing things differently with the exception of how it's specific to our content than other teachers. And by that, I mean, if a teacher is expected to have a Schoology page as their form of delivery in a virtual world, then we had that same expectation for our PE teachers. Why are they being treated differently? Why don't they have the same expectation? So we created a sample Schoology page, and you can see all the folders there. And as you click on those folders and go in, it actually opens up to lessons, videos, and things like that. You obviously can't do it here because it's not a live link, but we wanted to create a sample so that our social studies teachers have a Schoology page that looks just like this. This is not our template. This is the template that we as a committee developed that all teachers are going to use. Are there going to be some differences? Yes, but for the most part, the content that's being expected for them to provide is there. If you're going to have a video that you want your kids to work on while they're at home, here's where those videos go. And so when we have kids, we have families who have multiple kids at different levels. What we don't want to say, well, you know what, my high school's teacher has one Schoology site, and my middle school's child's teacher's got something totally different, and my elementary school teacher's like, I don't even know what they're doing. This is some structure and some stability that our parents and our kids can say, I understand Schoology, because every time I go to Schoology with all of my teachers, there are some similarities. And so we're asking our PE teachers to do that as well. So that's just a sample of what that might look like. So in terms of SHAC, we did not utilize our SHAC directly, and we probably could have done that better. We just didn't. However, our district did use their normal mass communication platforms to survey teachers and to survey parents to find out what is it that they want, what are their wishes for the reopening of school. Is it 100% virtual? Is it face-to-face? Is it going to be hybrid? Which of those do you want your child to be in? And we're going to honor that. I mean, once a parent said, you know what, I want my kid 100% virtual, I'm too scared of this, great, we can provide that. Or, you know what, I want my kid going to school, but maybe not the whole week, so they have that hybrid piece, then we'll be able to accommodate that too. And then we have some kids who, because of their learning styles or because of their particular situation, they want to be at school every day. So we have an option for that as well. And so we actually have 3 options that we're going to have once we come back on September 8th. But that's going to be based on what the parents and the students are asking for themselves. Next slide. So just some final thoughts here. So over here on the left, you see that bald mountain over there. It looks like it might be impossible. It seems impossible from this point. But as you see over here on the right, that's actually me and my son standing on top of that very peak that you see right there. It's possible. You can conquer it. It takes time. It takes planning. So we didn't go from that picture on the left there at the lake. We didn't go from there to the top in a day. It took some planning. It took some effort. It took some work. It took some crying. You know, I'll admit that. You know, it took some pain and some suffering, but we got there and we were able to conquer it. And so I just want to end by saying it's possible. It's possible. And I know it seems like it's not, but it certainly is. So, Michelle?
Thank you, John. You all 3 been very inspirational, and the advocacy part is very important. I know that we have the parents I've talked to at some of the schools, that they begin to value the importance of recess, the importance of physical activity. They see the need for good nutrition. So a lot of the things that we have been preaching to everyone for years is being reinforced in this time. So it is a great time to have school health advisory councils advocating for better nutrition, physical education, physical activity, recess, brain breaks, all the things that kids need. And I'm excited to see that y'all have developed plans for not just when they're at school, but remotely, because that's one of my big concerns. And I've talked to, I believe, one of your PE teachers, John, that had kids going and doing a scavenger hunt. You know, he would set it up where they would go and look for a green item and come back in front of the screen, or go look for something that's round. So they're learning and they're active. And so those are things that I think are really important and critical while we're in this strange time that we're dealing with. We did have some questions, and I know that you guys have answered some of them, but if you'll just kind of unmute yourself and let us know if you have any additional comments. One of the questions was about sanitizing playgrounds, and Pete weighed in on that. John or Kelly, have y'all got anything you'd like to add that might be a variation on that question?
So
I'm gonna-
unfortunately, unfortunately, I do not. I've done a lot of research on the sanitation, not just playgrounds, but just PE equipment in general. I've talked to Gopher and Neil's games and all of the vendors, and there's not a lot out there, and so we haven't addressed that yet. You know, for us, that's not going to be an issue until at least September 8th, when our kids actually come on campus. But that's a great question. I wish I had an answer for it, but there's just not a lot of information out there on how so one thing I can say is this: we are focusing the first 2 weeks that our kids come back to school in September 8th. Those first 2 weeks, the lessons that are being provided those 2 weeks are going to be around social distancing. You know, we're going to use all of the spatial awareness concepts that we teach in PE. We're going to focus on that the first 2 weeks, and we're also asking them to front load the parts of our curriculum, because we have a district curriculum that they kind of pick and choose when they want to do each unit. But this year we're going to direct them to pick those units that don't require a lot of equipment. Use our dance units. Let's do our units that are fitness based. Let's do our spatial awareness units that don't require kids to have to throw balls back and forth or use bean bags and those kinds of things. So we're going to front load all those to the first couple of weeks of school to not have to do the sanitation piece. But the playground equipment, I wish I had an answer. I just do not.
Kelly, did you have anything?
It's part of our plan that the playgrounds will be disinfected each morning prior to school. Our maintenance department will be doing that.
And Pete had mentioned that UV light and other elements on outdoor services make transmissions low. And I saw a story just this morning where they had tested playground equipment for COVID and had found nothing in 2 states. So they did a big testing on those.
I think it was a Harvard report that was put out recently that that is really a great report. I'll see if I can send the link to you, Michelle.
Okay.
But that mentioned that because early on, that's what we were trying to think about. You know, how can we hit all of these surfaces outside to sanitize them? But then, you know, when you start to really back away from it a little bit and think how hot those surfaces get and the exposure to light and to air and to all of that stuff, then I think some of those barriers then become problematic in us trying to support the immediate safety concern, and that the immediate safety concern is that we need immune systems high, you know. So the only way we do that is we get kiddos outside, you know. That recirculated air inside the school is not where we need kids. It's really not, you know. And so I know that's it depends. We get mixed messages on that. In Texas, we're in a situation than we are in the inner city, you know. So outside spaces here often mean less exposure.
So again,
Michelle? Oh, sorry, John. I was going to add that I do know I visited with several school districts who are also utilizing the fogger type of systems that have been purchased. A lot of that is in the middle school and high schools where they are utilizing indoor weight rooms or athletics. And so I think for some school districts, I'm hearing they have been able to purchase a number of those fogger type systems that will be used on a regular basis to help in sanitation.
Yeah, and we're doing that inside those spaces. We had originally thought, well, maybe you run those through the playground too. And we don't have plans to do that at this point, just the indoor spaces.
Okay.
So our city municipalities, our city leaders obviously are working very closely with the experts on recommendations. And so right now our city parks our playground parks are closed to the public, but once they start opening those back up again, you know, they're clearly not sanitizing those every single day. And if our health experts say it's okay for your kids to go to the park and play on the swing, then it's probably okay for our kids to play on our playgrounds too. But we're going to follow our city guidance on that before we make those decisions. So Michelle, there was a question on the chat. Somebody asked about brain breaks. Who's going to provide those resources? So I'm an advocate of the experts in the building need to provide their expertise. And so our PE teachers will be that expertise. And so when we have our back to school training the week of August 10th, we are providing not on the Schoology page I showed you there, but on our health and PE Schoology site, all kinds of resources that our PE teachers can share with their classroom teachers on what would be a good brain break to do in my classroom. And so we are providing, the teachers will be doing them, but our health and PE experts, because that's what they are, will be providing those resources and those links to those teachers to help support that effort.
Great. There's a couple of questions about getting the link to the Harvard report, and John, your schedule and the format, and those are all part of this slide PowerPoint, and we will be sending out a PDF that has all of that information in it after the event, probably within the next couple of days.
Michelle, I think another question that was raised related to how many kids would be allowed in a gym space, or in some cases, I do know some school districts are also utilizing the larger indoor cafeteria type of spaces. If there's inclement weather, they're utilizing that as a backup space. John, did you want to respond back to that also as far as the space?
Yeah, I did answer that question on the chat, but there's CDC guidelines for that. And so it's based on square footage. So I can't tell you, oh, we're only going to have 25 kids in our gym. If your gym is large, you can obviously have more. It's going to vary from campus to campus. It's going to vary from classroom to classroom. We may have some classrooms even in the same building where you can only have 12 kids based on square footage. In the classroom next door, you can have as many as 15 based on square footage. And I wish I could tell you it's one per every number of square feet. I don't have that off the top of my head, but I know there are CDC guidelines, and I know our district maintenance people are currently right now going through campuses and actually measuring and saying, okay, this is how many kids this size classroom can have. So that's all driven by square footage.
Awesome. So one other question that I saw, and Pete answered it, I don't know if John or Kelly, if you have the requirement of using water bottles as opposed to water fountains, and how do kids refill water bottles that they bring from home?
Yeah, I saw Pete's answer, and I have heard that our district is in the process of purchasing those water bottle refill stations, but I don't think that's happened yet. I don't know what the status is. So right now it's that's something that we're still working on addressing.
Kelly, are y'all dealing with that?
We are. It's being left up to the different campuses based on their population and their need and the staff. But the students the water fountains are going to be turned off. The students are going to be required to have their names on the water bottles. They can't be glass containers. And we have some guidelines in regards to that, depending on what campus they're talking about. But that's still a battle that we're working through.
Can I add a little bit on that? So a SHAC initiative that we did a couple of years ago in Seguin was we bought a bunch of water bottles and branded them with some logos of local businesses that helped underwrite the bottles. And then we sold those and then used that money towards putting bottle fill stations around the district. And so our goal was to have at least one at every campus. But the ultimate goal is that every drink fountain needs to be retrofitted. I mean, that's the way that the world should function now. And when you guys, when you go to an airport or almost any public space, that's what you're seeing. And we need to promote proper hydration and make the facilities support that. But it's a huge cost, those retrofit kits are $500 to $1,000, and a new full replacement $15,000 to $2,000. So, in Seguin ISD, we have 153 water fountains, and we're not a huge district. So, John, 100,000. So I mean, you think that becomes millions of dollars.
Yeah. Okay. There was a question, and I know John has shared some information on brain break resources. Are there other are y'all, Kelly and Pete, are you guys supporting brain breaks with your teachers, and how are you, or what are you recommending that they do?
you want, go ahead.
Kelly, you go first.
I'm sorry. I've not been involved in those discussions with our teachers. I know that they are encouraged, and on my campus, different teachers have a little bit different approach, and they do that to open each class as a way to help the kids with transitioning for each subject. But I don't haven't been involved in that discussion.
So I think brain breaks are important in setting the foundation for that a student's brain is only able to receive information when it is in a conducive environment for that. And we hit a saturation point, and then we need to have this reset time. Now, we talked quite a bit about brain breaks a few years ago, and just like John said, I mean, it's all a process that he has in place. So he's working through that right now. And so we have transitioned to where we are facilitating those reset times with outdoor unstructured recess. So the brain breaks are no longer necessary in the class because we're doing the outdoor ones. And research will tell you that that's really what needs to happen. And so the brain breaks, I think, are necessary in building that culture of understanding that academic and instructional times need to be segmented. And we really don't need to be sitting in a desk longer than an hour. None of us as adults need to be doing that either, really. And so that's good to have that opportunity for that reset. But what we really need for physiological function to be ideal, we need that outside time. That outside time then allows for your fight or flight response to more normalize. And so anyway, so I think they're important steps, but I think it's a step towards the next one, which is outdoor unstructured.
Yeah, Pete's exactly right. And I mean, your 4 recesses, those are your brain breaks, and those are the most effective brain breaks you could hope for. Being outside is great. And Pete's right. We had laid the foundation for that for a while. I mean, I do a training every year at the beginning of the year for new teachers and for our teachers who are on that first 3 year about brain breaks and how effective they can be. And it's a matter of if you're going to teach a new concept that you know your kids might struggle with, do a brain break first. Prime that brain for that new material, and it always comes down to time. And I always use this analogy: if I asked you for $5 and I gave you $7 in return, would you take that deal? And they always say yes. And I always tell them, well, guess what? That's what brain breaks can do for you from instructional. You give me 5 minutes of your time for a brain break, and you're going to get that time back plus extra time because the brains are actually ready to go. And so that's the expectation in our district. And so, yeah, I mean, our teachers are ready for that. And so they're aware of it. And for the most part, I can't say it's across the board, but yeah, Pete's exactly right. Having an outside time is even better. That's like, I love the Link project. I wish we could do that in El Paso, but you know, it's a process, but that's a great way to go.
Alice, did I miss anything?
No, I think the only question I saw or additional questions related to sharing resources, and we will be doing that when we send out the materials.
Yes, definitely. So we're continuing this series of webinars that are to support using your School Health Advisory Councils effectively, and also hitting on the key areas of concern as we go back into school when it comes to the whole child and having a healthy student. So we are working to get a couple of our school administrators to talk about their perspective on reopening, what their plans are, how their School Health Advisory Council has been able to work with them. So check on our website for that registration, and then we'll send something out in our monthly newsletter as well. And also we'll be doing a School Health Advisory Council 101 in September. And then we have a couple of webinars around vaping, because that's been a critical issue that will be coming up. These are all on our Action for Healthy Kids website under events. We'll also send you a link to a one-page resource we have developed with Pete and some of the other school districts about what SHACs should be doing and how they can be engaged with the district as we move forward. I think it's critical that SHACs be there representing parents and getting the community engaged. They can be such a good resource, and they really can be effective if we can get them all up and rolling the way they're supposed to be. So we're trying to do everything we can to support the SHACs and help support the school districts as they work to include the whole child as we're moving forward. There'll be, these links will be on the PowerPoint PDF that we send you. We have a Texas team page that has some resources for SHACs and for parents. We also have a lot of SHAC webinars on YouTube. This one will be, if you go to YouTube and search for Healthy Kids, Healthy Families, you'll find all the ones that we've done over the last 5 years around topics: social emotional wellness, recess, parent engagement, our town hall that we did in June. Those are all there. And then there's also a link to that guide that I just mentioned. So that is it for me. I haven't seen any other questions. Thank you so much, Kelly, Pete, and John, and Alice. Thanks for keeping me honest on the questions and answers. We look forward to seeing you on future webinars, and we hope that this has been something that was useful as you and your districts are moving towards reopening this fall. So
Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. If I can find the the end button. There we go.